Separation of church and state. Well, this is about something that should concern every American, no matter the party, no matter the faith. The Pentagon, or rather Hegseth, invited a pastor to preach inside the Department of Defense. Not just any pastor, a man who has publicly said women shouldn't vote, that slavery in the South was harmonious, and that society should be governed by biblical law. Now, before anybody says this is about attacking Christianity, it's not about that. This is about judgment. This is about who gets elevated in the United States government, and it's about whether they're moral guardrails.
Tonight, Pete Hegseth is again facing scrutiny after inviting a self-described Christian nationalist to deliver a prayer service at the Pentagon. Pastor Doug Wilson is the co-founder of a growing network of churches that Pete Hegseth is a part of. He believes that women should not be allowed to vote, that some slave owners were decent human beings, and that society should be governed by a strict interpretation of biblical law, where homosexuality, for example, is a crime. Now, Wilson gave a 15-minute sermon at the Pentagon's auditorium, which was broadcast on the department's internal TV network and confirmed by the Defense Department on social media. His sermon focused on putting Christ, Jesus, first. I guess he calls himself a paleo-Confederate, something or another. But this is a man who, in addition to everything that we just talked about, I mean, he has gone to great lengths to explain why slavery was not as bad as people make it seem. He said, slavery as it existed in the South was not an adversarial relationship with pervasive racial animosity. Because of its dominantly patriarchal character, it was a relationship based on mutual affection and confidence. There has never been a multiracial society which has existed with such mutual intimacy and harmony in the history of the world.
Let's stop right there. Mutual affection. That's the phrase I need everybody to let roll off their tongue. Mutual affection. That's the phrase that is describing slavery as mutual affection. That is not just controversial, that is dangerous rewriting of history. Slavery was ownership of human beings, treating human beings as animal, as chattel. It was enforced by violence and the law. Families were separated. Children were taken from their mothers, their fathers. People were beaten, sold, and treated as though they were property under the law. There is no mutual affection when one side has a whip and the other side has no legal rights. And here's why this matters inside of the Pentagon. The Pentagon represents the Constitution. It represents equal protection under the law. It represents the country that fought a civil war over slavery. So when someone who publicly sanitizes slavery, glamorizes slavery, is invited into that building to preach, that's not a small decision that was made. That is a signal. And the question is simple. Why him? There are thousands upon thousands of Christian pastors in the United States. Why elevate somebody who defends one of the darkest chapters in American history? Why? That's not about religion. That's about judgment.
But for him to be invited to the Pentagon in the United States government, I don't understand how that can even happen.
Well, let's clarify a few things. One, this is a voluntary deal, so you're not forced to attend it if you work at the Pentagon. They bring in all kinds of different religious leaders. They have Buddhists, they have Jewish people, they have Hindus, they have plenty of different representation of different religious views.
Right. It's voluntary. They bring in Buddhists, Jews, Hindus, He didn't talk about those views in the sermon. But an invitation from the Pentagon is not neutral. Let's be clear. When the Department of Defense broadcasts somebody internally, that carries institutional credibility, like they actually believe what they're saying. Specifically, if you don't separate the sermon from the speaker's public record. If someone has publicly said women shouldn't vote and slavery was harmonious, that follows them into the room, even if they don't repeat it on that day. And think about who serves in the military: women, blacks, LGBT, people of every faith. So when leadership invites somebody who questions the rights or dignity of some of those people that serve, that symbolism matters. Unity matters. Cohesion matters. The military depends on it. This is not just about religious diversity. It's about whether somebody whose ideology conflicts with constitutional equality should be elevated inside of the Pentagon. That's what this says.
Representation of different religious views, and his sermon had nothing to do with what you just described.
But this has nothing to do with religious views. This has to do with somebody who has ahistorical, hateful views.
Well, look,
Christian.
Louis Farrakhan had a lot of different views, and Louis Farrakhan was presented
invited to the Pentagon.
He was invited to a lot of powerful places.
He was invited to the Pentagon.
I don't know if he was invited to the Pentagon or not.
Was he?
He was certainly invited to
government.
Was he
invited to the White House?
He was certainly invited to government.
I mean, look, I think it's a question of, is it appropriate? Look, there are Christian pastors and interfaith leaders in the Congress. Nobody is disputing that. The question is this guy.
But he didn't talk about any of that. He talked about victory in battle. He talked about faith. Well, I mean, you're saying that he has certain views, so therefore he should be ostracized and not allowed in the Pentagon.
Yes, I am saying that. Yes.
And I'm saying that they let all kinds of different views in there.
So you don't agree? You think that it's okay to be there?
I think that Pete Hegseth has a right to, they have a right to have different views there. I do think they have a right to have different views.
But here's the thing. So I ran the faith portfolio for Barack Obama, and we did bring different views. Yeah. We had the Guru Nanak celebration. We had Diwali. We had our iftars. We had the the Easter prayer breakfast. Ran them all. Different views. We didn't bring jihadists in the White House. We didn't bring white supremacists in the White House. We read people's sermons. We ensured that the words that they professed because of their faith were not demonizing another faith. We had Hanukkah at the White House. I believe that we are a nation that should celebrate different faiths. I really do. Not, though, at the expense of others. Second, what he was saying about slavery has nothing to do with spirituality or Christianity or any faith. It is a perverse approach. There was no harmony between the master and the slave. The master may think that, but the slave had no power. That is just a fact, and that is wrong. And if it's not the case, then why doesn't he become a slave? Because I'm sure there wouldn't be no harmony there. And then the final thing is, it is not an isolated event. We cannot look at this as an isolated event.
This is the heart of the debate right here. Every administration exercises discretion. Yes, America protects religious freedom. Yes, prayer is allowed. But leadership means drawing lines. Diversity of faith does not mean diversity of dehumanization. No government says we'll invite extremists just to prove we're inclusive. There are standards. And the real question is simple. Is publicly defending slavery as being harmonious beyond the line? Is arguing that women shouldn't vote beyond the line? That's not anti-Christian. There are millions of Christians who believe in democracy, equality, and pluralism. This is about whether Christian nationalist ideology, which argues for biblical governance over constitutional democracy, should be elevated inside the Department of Defense. The Pentagon represents every American, not just Christian nationalism. When leadership elevates someone whose public record undermines equal rights, people will question that decision. I'm sorry. And that's not outrage. That's accountability. Y'all need to stop it. The First Amendment protects belief. We get it. It does not require the government to platform everybody's belief. When we're talking about the Pentagon, one of the most powerful institutions in the world, judgment matters. That's why this story matters. Not because it's loud, but because it reveals how lines are being drawn inside these American institutions by this administration. You all hit the like, share, and subscribe. We have this content every day. This is HQ.